Welcome to Pickwick Monthly, everyone. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I have a bevy of Pickwickian co-hosts today. Everybody is on board for this episode. Kevin Quinn, Courtney Krolczyk, Jacob Romanow, and James Armstrong. Merry Dickens, everyone.
Merry Dickens, Ed.
And for today, we are all here to celebrate a Dickensian Christmas, as well as for 20 months talking about Charles Dickens's The Posthumous Papers of the Pickwick Club as it was first serialized in monthly parts from March 1836 to October 1837. And once a month, we deal with each serial issue. Along the way, I'll share some items from the Rosenbach's collections, complete serial issues of the Pickwick Papers, a portion of the Pickwick manuscript. I can't wait till we get to the chapters that have the manuscript that we have at the Rosenbach. The Rosenbach has many first editions signed by Dickens, the earliest surviving literary manuscript of Charles Dickens. We have lots of letters, ephemera, and we have a lock of Dickens's hair. I've got to share that on the air one day. Unfortunately, I can't bring it here and then just hold it up. We'll have to get some photos to share it with. In today's episode, though, that's why this is a Christmas episode, number 10, chapters 27 to 29, or it could be 28 if you're reading the Penguin Classics edition. More on that in a little bit. But the Pickwickians celebrate Christmas at Dingley Dell in grand Old English style with songs and games and wassail, which I'm drinking, and a ghost story. And if you're watching live right now, please like and subscribe and have fun in the live chat. If you're watching the recording, please like and subscribe. And I would love for you to leave comments or questions. All right, guys. First of all, Christmas and it's easy to get attention for Dickens stuff for Christmas and everybody loves it. And, it's the Christmas Carol and all. But as we'll see, dealing with this today, the kind of influence that Dickens the influence that Christmas had on Dickens and his works is earlier. But I want to ask you if you have you been influenced by Dickens in the way you see Christmas or celebrate Christmas? And none of you knew this question was coming. So this is like an honest answer. So has Dickens influenced the way you think about Christmas time? Who wants to go first?
Well, I mean, I, force my family to be influenced by it in some ways, everybody, buys me my little Dickens guys, and we I try to incorporate some Dickensian themed Christmas celebrations. Like there was a lovely punch at the Rosenbach that Ed created from Dickens' own recipe, so we may do that as well. But yeah, no, I mean, I think broadly, even in places you wouldn't expect, like before I moved to New Jersey, we would go to there are these Dickens Christmas celebrations. I think the first one started in like the first Dickens Christmas fair, I think it was in San Francisco, probably in the 70s or something, and they really spread all across the country. And we have a fairly big one in Galveston, Texas, pretty near to where I'm from in Houston. And you can go and buy Dickens themed Christmas stuff, and often Lucinda Huxley Dickens goes there and things too, so you can see it in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect a large volume of Dickensian fans, like Galveston, Texas, which really does have some of the best Victorian architecture in the South of the United States.
Great. Who's next? James.
Well, I can't imagine that anybody celebrates Christmas without being influenced by Dickens. Little known fact, but the great Muppet classic, A Christmas Carol, not a lot of people know this. It's actually based on a Dickens novel.
What?
Yeah. But you can have even not have read Dickens, and you're still going to be influenced by so much of what he wrote. And incidentally, I was at City College, and their library was having a book sale of a bunch of stuff that people don't really use anymore, including a bunch of spoken word discs, a bunch of records with spoken word that, college students today aren't going to go and check out a record so much. And so they were selling this for like $1 a piece. And I picked up Pickwick Papers.
I have
It's
that.
got Sir Lewis Cashion doing the Pickwick Christmas chapter, and then Boris Karloff does How the Goblins Stole the Sexton. And this is the kind of thing that from Dickens' time to today has just been part of like the popular entertainment.
I would have loved that library sale. I collect, vinyl spoken word, and I have that one, of course. That's a Cadman, I think. And that's a great one to listen. I mean, Boris Karloff doing the Goblins That Stole a Sexton is fantastic. You can find it online too, kids. You don't need to get the vinyl. It's online. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube and wherever else you can find it online. But that's really well done. So, Kevin, how about you?
It's some of the things Courtney said and James, of course, resonated. Going to things like there's another Dickens festival in San Francisco, Courtney. That's a big one out there. And the Cow Palace that I dragged my family to and things like that. But going back to what James was saying, like I was thinking about like on a fundamental level, probably I was influenced in my Christmas through Dickens without even knowing it, from our earliest ages, right? Because he helped to mold and shape the holiday and sort of our Western attitudes toward it. So you're almost like steeped in it like tea without even knowing it, growing up.
Yeah, I did. I mean, before I really read all of Dickens, well, definitely before I read all of Dickens, I was reading Christmas Carol every year. And, before I even hit the rest of the novels, Christmas Carol was always on the list. I was always watching them. The George C. Scott was my favorite. And, I would watch these things every year and read this every year and participate at least in the Christmas Carol part of it all. But now it's funny. Now I talk about Goblins and Pickwick more than I talk about Christmas Carol in my life. So
it's also a wonderful story. And even like a story like The Grinch. I mean, come on, that's basically a rebound Christmas Carol, right? Yeah. I mean, his heart growing 3 sizes that day.
Or a reworked Goblin Who Stole a Sexton. So, as
there
Christmas
you have
Carol, we work that. So, right. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, so much of our sense of what Christmas is Dickensian, right?
Yeah.
The association of charitableness, of generosity, of merriness, of it as a sort of party celebration and a sort of pseudo-secular cultural event. If not originated with Dickens, at least as a process that was completely shaped by Dickens and his popularity. I'm Jewish, so I was raised outside of the personal celebration of Christmas, so I experienced it as a cultural artifact that is, of course, part and parcel with these annual performances, the Christmas Carol and these readings and these things. Very hard to pull apart.
Yeah, and part of the one of the wonderful things about Dickens is the Dickens Christmas does kind of secularize it in a sense. I mean, Dickens himself is certainly, religious and has that as part of it, but it really becomes about the family more than it becomes about the worship thing well, definitely in Christmas Carol. And then you're able to bring Dickens into this kind of interfaith celebration of the holiday season.
I don't know what happened to the goose. I feel like one of these years we got to do a Dickensian Christmas goose.
I said it to my wife the other day.
So much though, Jake. I wouldn't do that to them. I mean, I also love chickens, and I do that to them. So
I said this to my wife the other day. I don't think I've ever had goose at all. And one of these days, I want to have a goose, but we'll see if we get that in. One thing I always have, though, at this time of year is all these delicious beverages. Here's a picture of my Dickensian. I'll put this up, and it's right here after this one. There it is. This is the wassail that I made for the show today. Ale and cider with sugar and mulling spices. You bake the apples first, and I put some star anise in there, and it is absolutely delicious. And this is the kind of thing I like to drink up every year throughout the season. And we had the Dickens recipe punch at Drinking with Dickens at the Rosenbag, and I'm actually drinking it out of my wassail today. I'm drinking it out of my Santa mug. This is my kid mug. Like, I had this as a very small child. This was, we all had Santa mugs, and this was mine. And so I still have it. And then it goes to my youngest daughter, Lulu. I have 5 daughters, and it goes to the youngest because I was the youngest. And so I said that to her one day, like, oh, you're the youngest, you should get it. And then she has held on to that. She's like, then that's mine. Remember that, I'm getting the mug.
I also have a new Sam Weller from a New Jersey estate sale, but I don't think he's really big enough to drink too much liquor out of. Or
that's like a shot. That's like a shot glass.
Yeah, like a shot of pure liquor would be good size for him.
I did. Well, I have a hat today too. I can put my hat on. I actually got a new Dickens plate to go with I have a Macabre plate, and now I have this one. It's the first appearance of Mr. Sam Weller. It's that
I have that plate. I have that plate as well.
Is this, and it's
Adams.
Yeah, illustrations from Pickwick. Yeah, Adams. Yeah. Oh, and it's got this Pickwick Papers and a little Dickens there stamped on the back. So
now that we're showing off, I might as well show some of my other estate sale finds. This lovely Pickwick Papers. Yeah, Fat Boy. And we have Mr. Weller.
Nice.
Sorry. Hard to, trying to get the right things here. So that's nice and big. And then this is not Roald Dalton like the rest of them, but we have a very strange illustration. It's actually from the last number we covered, or you guys covered. Job Trotter meets Sam in Mr. Nuss's kitchen. What odd thing to put on a plate, but
that's wild. That's a good illustration too. Well, as I drink my I could do the West Hale, and you could all say drink Hale every time I drink, but you'd be shouting at the whole show. So because this is just too tasty to stop.
Is this Cedric Dickens recipe you're using here?
It is not. This recipe actually comes from a book called Convivial Dickens, but it's a very basic recipe. It's it's just ale and cider and sugar and spice. I mean, you just heat it all up, and I bake the apples first and then put them in.
Dickens, I think his favorite food was baked apples.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
They are delicious. And then after they're soaking in the wassail, and that's a nice little dessert later on for dinner. So. All righty, everyone. Let us start talking about some of this, because I have a little preliminary matter too before we get to the number itself. The 10th number of the posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club was published on December 31st, 1836. The last Wednesday of the month is magazine day in England at the time, and it happened to be December 31st that year. Dickens, in December 1836, his play, The Village Coquettes, had debuted earlier in the month on a bill with that also included the 50th performance of his play, The Strange Gentleman. And I've mentioned this a few times on shows, because I really do think in Dickens's head, it's like, I might become a famous playwright. This is working for him, this stuff as well. The final curtain call for The Village Coquettes, in the Examiner review of it, they wrote that the audience screamed for bows at the end. And And when Dickens, and then so Dickens comes out and appears, and the review said they were left in perfect consternation that he neither resembled the portraits of Pickwick, Snodgrass, Winkle, nor Tupman. Some critics in the gallery were said to have expected Samuel Weller. That, this is Bose to the entire audience. Bose just means Pickwick Papers. And Village Coquette got some nice, it got actually some good reviews, and it got some not good reviews. It wasn't the hit that Strange Gentleman was. It runs for 16 nights, but it did have about 10 revivals earlier the next year. So it kept being revived here and there, and then Dickens kind of he publishes it, but then he kind of disowns it. He doesn't want anybody to ever perform it again, and he realizes that this isn't the direction that he's going to go. The one thing I want to remind the people watching too is Dickens at the time, because of course we're so inundated with images of Dickens that this is the Dickens we're talking about. This is one of the Samuel Lawrence drawings of him young. And look at the eyes. Like, now I kind of think that they're a little larger in this picture than they could have been in real life. But what it means is that it was probably a feature that you really got your attention when you looked at Dickens, or at least it did with Samuel Lawrence. And this is the Dickens we're talking about, young and just ready to do anything he wants, and being successful, it seems, at everything he tries to do. He has some degree of success with. And he is also recently married, and he and his wife Catherine are expecting their first child, who will be born on January 6th. And then that will lead to perpetual 12th night birthday parties for Charlie Jr. that Dickens would throw every year and invite all his friends and do his magic shows for the children, because Dickens loved to do magic shows. And that's what's going on in Dickens's life when number 10 comes out. Dickens, of course, loved Christmas. He's socializing all over the place this month. There's not as many letters that survive from this early in his career, but even there's a few that do, that he's talking about the parties that I'm going to, and hosting himself. But we'll talk about his love of Christmas a little later when we get to the Christmas chapters. Now, we're covering chapters 27 to 29 today. Although some people might read an edition where it's chapter 27, 28, and 28-1 or 20, because the Penguin Classics does that. The Penguin Classics edition has 28 and 28I, lowercase 1, Roman numeral 1. Because in the Pickwick Papers, it's chapter 28 for the good-humoured Christmas chapter. And then the Goblins to Solace Sexton after it is, again, chapter 28. And in the contents that he publishes at the end of the serial for the first edition of the book, that table of contents actually looks like this. And it's chapter 28, the good-humoured Christmas chapter, chapter 28 with an asterisk for the story of the Goblins who stole a Sexton. So it's when we get to this point in the talking about it, it's kind of it's almost like a little joke that he's doing the same chapter again, because this one got too long for him. So he's just going to continue it, but it's still chapter 28. Unfortunately, what happened is some of the later editions, and in Dickens's lifetime, then they abandoned the 228s, and then Goblins becomes 29 and forward. So the edition that I'm having, well, my Penguin edition and the serial parts that I share everyone are off. Like each serial part is the numbers are off, but it's most editions actually won't be that way. So most editions actually have 27, 28, and 29 for these 3 chapters today. I'm sorry to belabor this. But I just don't want people to not read a chapter that they're supposed to read, because a lot of editions of it, you can't tell. It doesn't include where the serial divisions are. So you can always look at the serial edition that, we post on the Pickwick Monthly webpage and see the 3 chapters in there and match that up with the book that you're reading. All righty. Chapter 27. Let's start with that. So we're going to get another chapter. We get a chapter, and then we get the Christmas chapters for the Christmas month. And then next month, it starts with the Christmas chapter. Actually, Christmas Day is in part of 11. He could have put the 3 in 1, but this is it's odd that he didn't. That he wanted to continue this Sam first before the Christmas stuff. But this is Sam makes a pilgrimage to Dorking and beholds his mother-in-law. We get some good banter between father and son, and we will have some very unfortunate racism that we're going to have to talk about here. But Sam decides to pay a visit to his father and meet his mother-in-law, the widder that, Weller Sr. has been, constantly warning him and complaining about, that has ruined his life, marrying this widder. I don't know how it's ruined his life when he's got this free pub that he gets to go to all the time when he's off the road and eat and drink in a pub that's his home. But Sam has been suddenly stricken. He was suddenly stricken filial and affectionate, and realizes he needs to take a leave of absence to go visit his father and meet his mother-in-law. Pickwick is happy about this. He's glad to see it. And we get a Wellerism. Pickwick says that it's very gratifying reflection, Sam said, Mr. Pickwick. And then Sam says, somebody, ever you have that? Somebody read the Wellerism here.
I think it's the one, all
Worry,
good
sir.
feelings, sir. The very best intentions, as the gentleman said when he ran away from his wife, because she seemed unhappy with him.
The very best intentions, as the gentleman said to his wife, then he ran away from his wife because she seemed unhappy with him. So, all righty. Not the funniest Wellerism, but it's a Wellerism, and we have to hit every single one. And it fits, but it actually fits what's going on with, with Weller's, father and his wife, that, she's, she's unhappy with him, and he is unhappy with her. Well, Sam goes to visit, and the pub that the widder owns is called the Marquis of Granby, a roadside public house, large enough to be convenient, small enough to be snug. And what I didn't know is in doing this chapter that the Marquis of Granby there are supposed to be more pubs named the Marquis of Granby than any other in England. Did you get, James? You know this one?
Yeah, the Marquis of Granby funded money to go to veterans of the Napoleonic Wars.
The real Marquis, like who was an actual person, John Manners.
He was an actual person. And when the British government was allowing all of these returning veterans to basically end up homeless and destitute, the Marquis of Granby stood up and was like, I'm going to help out some of these guys. And that led to a tremendous amount of goodwill on the part of working class Britons for the historical Marquis. And that's why there's so many pubs named for him. I've been to one in London, and
yeah, there's one in London now. I know that.
Yeah. The story was told to me then by because it's not that far from the workhouse that was down the street from where Little Dickens grew up. And the neighborhood is changed over the years. When I was there, it was sort of undergoing a process of gentrification, but the my host there was like, yeah, this is an old school, like, working class pub that was created back when the Marquis of Granby was this sort of hero to working class people for doing what the government wouldn't.
And it's even by 1836 this is going on, that it's such a common name for Dickens to give to a pub that he recognizes that his audience will recognize that name for a pub. We don't know if he had an actual one in mind, because Dorking didn't have one then, and there have been a couple pubs proposed as this could be the one, but nobody knows for certain which, because Dickens does really seem to have exact locations in mind when he does things, and frequently names them because they're real places, but other times he's describing places that have existed. When Sam gets there, the first thing he sees is sitting by the fireplace, a man in threadbare black clothes with a back almost as long and stiff as that of the chair itself, prim-faced, red-nosed, long, thin countenance, and a semi-rattlesnake sort of eye, rather sharp but decidedly bad. And this is Mr. Stiggins, who is I don't think Stiggins isn't necessary. Is Stiggins a clergyman too, or he just works for the clergyman, the shepherd that, all the women support? I don't know if Stiggins is actually a clergyman. Is he, Courtney?
I think he is. They refer to him. Sam refers to him as Reverend Sir, and he seems pleased because he noticed his reverend appearance. So
yeah, but does that mean I wonder if that means that he's not,
look.
but he likes to think that he's one because he works for the shepherd, so I'm not sure. And the shepherd, whose name I can't remember because we don't even get his name yet. We won't get that till later in the novel, I think. And he is the one that it's the preacher that is kind of, that Tony Weller Sr.'s wife and all her friends are in his congregation and giving him money, and that's all part of this as well. And Tony Weller has punched him in the nose. So, but
this uncertainty lines up with a sort of common Victorian stereotype about sort of low church leaders who were suspicious because they might be trying to really flirt with the ladies who they were gathering in the drawing rooms for these religious meetings and things like that. So I think that perhaps it's part of the joke, or meant to be part of the joke, that his religiosity is somewhat ambiguous.
Well, Stiggins' religiosity is focused on how much food and drink can I get out of the people. He also has. I just wanted to mention that the umbrella. He has a faded green umbrella. Green umbrella. We've had this. A green umbrella with plenty of whale bones sticking through the bottom. And it might seem odd to people, but actually, umbrellas were made, and it's actually not bones of the whale. It's actually the baleen that's in a whale's mouth that would get. When it dried out, it would get stiff, it would get hard, but also flexible and strong. So it was used for umbrellas, it's used for corsets. It's just one of the things that the whale trade was supplying with people was umbrellas. But his is rather threadbare. And he is drinking a glass of reeking hot pineapple rum and water. I discovered that there's actually a rum company called Plantation, and it's a French company, Plantation Rum, and they have a variety called Stiggins Fancy Pineapple Rum that you can buy. So it's the Christmas episode. I'm not drinking it. And I don't understand the appeal of drinking like Stiggins. Like, as somebody who reads the Pickwick Papers, I'm like, yeah, I'm not like Stiggins. So why do I want to drink pineapple?
They make a Stiggins. I don't have it. It's one of the few I don't. They make a Stiggins figurine of a character. Again, what were they, why of all possible
I don't know.
characters to make this one, but it is one of the 20 or 30 figurines that Roald Dalton made.
Well, he is popular enough to have his own bottle of rum named after him, pineapple rum. So I guess it could, I mean, Pickwick Papers is famous, clearly, and pineapple rum is in there. And this rum company thought, it connects to Dickens. That's what they're really doing. So, but you can drink pineapple rum. And this was in the day when it was just, I think they just added pineapples to the barrels. They put pineapples in the rum. And that was the extent of pineapple rum. Nowadays, they make rum, like the pineapple itself is fermented in with, the rum, and that's how it's made. But in that day, it's just basically rum soaked in pineapple. And I can't imagine it was even that good. So, nor would it last. I don't know. But anyway, Dickens likes it. And that's what he's doing. Well, Sam comes in and right away he salutes his mother-in-law. I wish I was the Weller as owned you, mother-in-law. And he followed up his advantage by kissing her. Sam's, going to ingratiate himself with the Witter Weller now. And he does. Sam charms everybody, doesn't he? And Stiggins just sits at the bar eating, drinking for free, criticizing Tony Weller, the guy who's like, the husband of the owner of the place. And that seems to be what he does all the time, and groans a lot, and eats toast. And then he says, and here's where now we're gonna get to, like, this is the unfortunate part of this chapter. This is how it starts, because it starts with him criticizing Mr. Weller for not supporting our noble society, for providing the infant Negroes in the West Indies with flannel waistcoats and marl pocket handkerchiefs. So, all still funny, right? Satirizing these charitable groups who aren't really helping anybody. Dickens had, this bothered Dickens, this thing. When he went to several years later, when he went out looking at the ragged schools, and found that they were more interested in proselytizing and more interested in teaching catechism to these children who had nothing. I mean, they were just, practically living on the street poor. And Dickens thought that they should, to impress them even with the idea of God when their own condition is so desolate becomes a monstrous task. And teaching catechism is besides the point for children whose lives are one continued punishment. And this idea that, by giving people things that aren't really helping them in life isn't going to help them. But that kind of religious satire kind of goes out the window when Mr. Weller shows up, smokes a lot of pipes with Sam. They sit and smoke and smoke and smoke. And then he says that Sam says, "Oh, you think it's absurd to provide these people who live in a hot country with flannel waistcoats?" And he says, "Certainly not. What's the good of flannel waistcoats to the young N-word abroad?" And now we're faced right with it, that the whole approach of Tony Weller here is that why help these, people of another race when you could, help, people here, becomes this kind of, racial question, especially with, the use of the N-word. James, you dealt with this recently. You wrote a piece on this recently for dealing with it in Martin Chuzzlewit, didn't you?
Yeah, Martin Chuzzlewit, which was written a few years later. And Dickens, after he visited the United States and wrote the American Notes, wrote this book, Martin Chuzzlewit, which involves the hero going off to the United States. And yeah, okay, that nasty word shows up once here. It shows up a lot in Martin Chuzzlewit. But every single time it's put in the mouth of a horrible, disgusting racist that Charles Dickens wants us to hate.
Yeah.
And, you know, it should probably be said that at this time, Dickens was, at least according to Frederick Douglass, the most important abolitionist around, because Frederick Douglass said that after American Notes got published, and only contained one chapter on slavery. Most of it's not about slavery.
It's the end chapter, though, isn't it? Doesn't it finishes with a chapter?
He like goes through the whole book saying, "I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to talk about." Okay, I need to talk about this, and it gained him a huge amount of ill will in the United States because people said, you know, you're a visitor, you don't have this right to criticize us. But according to Frederick Douglass, American Notes did more to advance the cause of abolitionism than every single book written on abolitionism combined before that. Now, of course, this is before Douglass writes his own autobiography. This is before Uncle Tom's Cabin gets published and all that. But, you know, at that time in the early 1840s, Dickens is sort of being held up as sort of one of the most important people in the abolitionist movement. And if you look at the history of this particular word, sure, if you go back to, say, the 18th century, you can argue that not everybody's using it in a racist way. And maybe somebody in the early 18th century is using it more as a descriptive than a racial insult. By the time you get to the 1840s, no, this word is just toxic. Everybody knows it. And when Dickens uses it in Martin Chuzzlewit, again, it's never the narrator. It's only a person. It's always a really, really vile person, which makes me wonder if we're supposed to like Tony Weller. Is this a guy who's good-naturedly tossing his customers into ditches? Are we, you know, supposed to be thinking, oh, when he says these really misogynistic things about never marry a widow, maybe we're supposed to laugh this all off? But the fact that Dickens, when in this other book, he only uses this word for really vile characters, makes me wonder if maybe Dickens's intention is for us to not wonder why Sam Weller rarely comes home. That maybe, you know, this guy is being painted as a pretty horrible human being. Which, not that Stiggins is supposed to be nice or Mrs. Weller is supposed to be nice. And as I was reading it this time, I was thinking this is kind of the anti-Christmas chapter. This is the chapter where we see horrible people doing horrible things, and that then gets us ready for seeing Christmas as it's supposed to be celebrated. But I think if I grew up with Tony Weller as my dad, I might grow up to be like Gabriel Grubb.
Or not see him as often as Sam. Like he does, he goes long periods of time. When they meet earlier in the book, he hasn't seen him for years. Courtney?
Oh, just the only thing I would say, that's a really interesting point, James, and I would be, you know, I think generally would be inclined to agree with it, but the only thing is I think the kind of the sentiment, though, too, that Tony is expressing here, why are we helping these other races abroad when we could be helping, you know, white children back home, is kind of mirrored in the approach that Dickens takes to the character Mrs. Jellyby, I think that's the right name, in Bleak House, a couple decades later, who is this, for those unfamiliar, she's this philanthropist woman who's, you know, trying to evangelize to the African nations while her own home and children are in complete disarray and rags, and she doesn't pay any attention to what's going on, not just kind of in England, but even in her own, like, house, but also in her entrance to proselytize to the African nations. And like there's, you know, it's, I think our reaction as kind of modern readers to it can be kind of complex, because I think in a way, you do kind of recognize and even sympathize with this symphony that, like, we don't really like the Stiggins and the Mrs. Weller characters either, who are engaged in this kind of you could call it a kind of paternalistic colonialism as well too, right? Oh, we have to give these people moral handkerchiefs to teach them the ways of our enlightened white Christianity. But at the same time, these sentiments that we could even say are potentially anti-imperialistic sentiments are put through this racist lens and justification.
Well, and of course, Dickens would later write some fairly virulently racist writings on Jamaica and other things. But the other element of this that I would bring out for this chapter is the class coding element here. In mid-century Victorian fiction in general, I think the N-word is most often put in the words in the speech of Irish characters, Cockney characters, of lower class, working class characters. This seems to be something that middle class Victorians found funny. Yeah. It seemed to involve a certain kind of criticism, as James is pointing out, but perhaps not a sort of moral or political criticism as much as a sort of I certainly agree that Tony Weller is not a role model of a character and is not presented as one. But I do think he is sort of if not a lovable rogue, at least he's not like Stiggins, right? He's not somebody which the novel clearly puts us sort of against in our sensibilities, although I certainly agree you wouldn't necessarily want to be raised by him. And I think that's consistent with the sort of sense that a lot of white middle-class British writers have of the N-word as a sort of vulgarism of lower-class life, rather than a sort of ideologically or morally questionable.
Yeah, but and I like you guys bringing up that class issue too, because it's Irish, and those Irish or Cockney or working class characters, they're the ones that the middle class looks to for humor. They're kind of, like, they make them in the clowns, as Dickens is doing here, but they're also like the dispossessed as well. And I find that very interesting, that they're the ones that, at least in this instance, that's where that language exists among other, peoples who are kind of dispossessed and powerless. And I do see him as the lovable rogue, character and all. And I love him. And then this chapter, I'm like, and I know he has issues, and I know they're not good issues, but it's kind of like that, that the way Dickens is portraying him, except for this chapter, I can get on board with the kind of humor of him being rough and tumble, because he has the same kind of outlook as Mr. Pickwick on the world too. It's like, let's celebrate, let's have fun, let's enjoy ourselves as much as possible, except, he'll push someone in the ditch or dump some people, and Mr. Pickwick will be the guy getting thrown into the ditch. So, all righty. Well, it's unfortunate, and that's what we have to deal with in this chapter, because you can't ignore this stuff in literature when it comes up, and it's certainly there. It's interesting that it's there in the past without other readers, with many other readers then not blinking an eye about this kind of stuff, that they just accept it. And but not everyone. Some people did not accept this kind of thing, and that's what I want to make sure that I stress here, that when you come across something like this, or people watching this, you should question it, and it is something that takes away from the experience of these things, and you don't, or adds some darker elements to this that you might not want to deal with, but we're dealing with it anyway. So it's going to be there as books deal with life. Well, then there's a lot of smoking again. See, and maybe that's it. Maybe the only reason I really like Tony Weller is because all he wants to do is smoke his pipe. So I can, that might be my, that might be the thing that really tips me over with him. I even have like a tavern pipe today. I've got my old big, clay church warden that they would have been smoking. I can't even fit it in the frame if I try to smoke it. And that's what he's doing with Sam. He even lights it with the with the tongues from a coal from the fire, which you can do with a clay pipe. Can't do that with a briar pipe. You'll burn the heck out of it. For any pipe people out there, just a tip. Don't try that with your briar pipes. Stiggins keeps drinking his pineapple rum and water, a second, a third, and then has a supper. And Sam thinks that this is, crazy that he would let him, do this, that Sam thinks it's crazy that his father would put up with this guy coming in to the place. I like the family dynamic here is interesting. For as much as it's not palatable that Tony Weller is constantly complaining about the widow that he's married, who's in power in this, situation? It's the widow. And widows have this power in this culture for hundreds of years in England, when women don't usually have any power, but widows tend to have power, and men are terribly afraid of them and make fun of them. And Dickens too falls for this, but she is, it's the Marquis of Granby is hers. It's not Tony Weller's. And even though you'd think like, well, by law you married her, it's your, I don't, it doesn't happen. Even if that is the case, legally, if it's technically his, it's not his, and he has to live there and can't eject Stiggins. He gives a Wellerism himself, which I like, actually, this one. When Sam asks, why do you let him here? He says, because I'm a married man. And then, but whether it's worthwhile going through so much to learn so little, as the charity boy said when he got to the end of the alphabet, is a matter of taste. I like that one. Whether it's worthwhile going through so much to learn so little, as the charity boy said when he got to the end of the alphabet. And doesn't that reflect Dickens's view on education of kids too? Like, boy, you're just going to teach them the alphabet? That's it? And then what are they going to learn from that? That's just a lot of work. You need to do more than that. So anyway, Sam suggests that his father give Stiggins a good ducking, dump him in a water butt. And I thought that, well, we'll see. We'll see if he takes that advice. He's certainly thinking about it. So, and that's the end of the chapter. Now, are you ready? Now we can real have fun. For chapter 27, a good-humored Christmas chapter containing account of a wedding and some other sports beside, which, although
you should say, yes.
What's that?
28, yes.
28. I said 27, didn't I? Yeah, I'm totally wrecked on chapters in numbers now. So next week I'll be fine with. No, I won't be fine with them because my book will be off. But anyway, chapter 28, a good-humored Christmas chapter containing an account of a wedding and some other sports beside, which, although in their way, even as good customs as marriage itself, are not quite so religiously kept up in these degenerate times. Christmas. Who wants to read a little Christmas?
Let me see what page are we on? I'm happy. A numerous indeed of the hearts to which Christmas brings. Is that what we're talking about? Or
as brisk as bees? Yeah, like, and even before that.
Oh, Christmas as brisk as bees. Okay, okay. As brisk as bees, if not altogether as light as fairies, did the four Pickwickians assemble on the morning of the 22nd day of December, in the year of grace in which these, their faithfully recorded adventures, were undertaken and accomplished. Christmas was close at hand, in all his bluff and hearty honesty. It was a season of hospitality, merriment, and open-heartedness. The old year was preparing like an ancient philosopher to call his friends around him, and amidst the sound of feasting and revelry to pass gently and calmly away. Gay and merry was the time, and right gay and merry were at least four of the numerous hearts that were gladdened by its coming. And numerous indeed are the hearts to which Christmas brings a brief season of happiness and enjoyment. How many families whose members have been dispersed and scattered far and wide in the restless struggles of life are then reunited and meet once again in that happy state of companionship and mutual goodwill, which is a source of such pure and unalloyed delight, and one so incompatible with the cares and sorrows of the world that the religious belief of the most civilized nations and the rude traditions of the roughest savages alike number it amongst the first joys of a future state of existence, provided for the blessed and happy. How many old recollections and how many dormant sympathies does Christmas time awaken? Do you want me to go on, or?
James, you have that? Read that next paragraph.
We write these words now, or I can.
Yeah, you're muted, James.
Sorry. Okay, we write these words now many miles distant from the spot at which year after year we met on that day, a merry and joyous circle. Many of the hearts that throbbed so gaily then have ceased to beat. Many of the looks that shone so brightly then have ceased to glow. The hands we grasped have grown cold. The eyes we sought have hid their luster in the grave. And yet the old house, the room, the merry voices and smiling faces, the jest, the laugh, the most minute and trivial circumstances connected with those happy meetings crowd upon our mind at each recurrence of the season, as if the last assemblage had been but yesterday. Happy, happy Christmas, that can win us back to the delusions of our childish days and can recall to the old man the pleasures of his youth and transport the sailor and the traveler tens of thousands of miles away, back to his own fireside and his quiet home.
I mean, in 3 paragraphs, we get Dickens just like going to town. Like, I'm going to tell you what Christmas means to me. I get this, like he will later encapsulate it, in Fred's little speech in Christmas Carol. But here he's just kind of getting a handle on it. And it starts with that season of hospitality, merriment, open-heartedness, feasting, revelry, and families being reunited. And then and then it's especially that we write these words now part that James just read. I mean, I feel like it's Bose the narrator now coming in and really, right, Kevin?
Right. And it's sort of a change of tone, right? We're supposed to be in the posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club, and yet he just can't control himself, can he? He's got to bust in there as narrator in some meta fashion, and all of a sudden, he's talking directly to his readers in that sort of homey, standing at your elbow style that made the reader feel like, gee, he's really having a private conversation with me, and really personalize it, I think. And James, I know that happy Christmas line, James, when you read that, you could just feel it, how he wants to make that real personal connection with his readers, and I think that was a big part of his success.
And it's that last paragraph there that I think he hints to it in the first, but it's really that last paragraph that he hits that part where it's remembering those, who are no longer with us, those in our families, and friends who have died, that, Christmas still has the power to take us back to happier times in the past when we were with them, or in our childhood, because childhood seems to be key for Dickens for Christmas. And we see that here. what do you call it, the delusions of childhood, but I don't think he's using delusions as a pejorative there, is he?
No, I think it's part of that world of fancy that he might
Yeah.
have used the word fancy, where, it's almost like this Don Quixote notion of, who's the fool, the one that sees the world as it is or how it might be. And, at the time he's writing, this whole notion of Christmas is being developed, right? I mean, Christmas Carol is still 1843, it's still a while away. I think he's like creating this. I wonder if he was out ahead of his readers a little bit in some of the notions that he's expressing.
Do we want to hit? I want to save Christmas celebrations and that time until we get to the kind of the kitchen in Dingley Dell when they're really celebrating. But it's all tied in here. This is his setup, and then I'll do the characters, and then I'll get to showing this kind of Christmas that he really wants to show everyone. Well, let me take this moment to do our mid-break and thank all of you for watching this episode. As a nonprofit organization, the Rosenbach Museum and Library depends on the generosity of friends and supporters like you to keep programs like this free and accessible to hundreds of fellow Dickens lovers worldwide. If you would like to donate to the Rosenbach, you can do so at our website. And you could also become a member. Membership gives you free museum admission, discounts on programs and courses, and exclusive invitations to member-only events. You can find out more about how to become a member on our website. And one of the benefits of membership is that it also gives you early access to lots of great in-person and virtual programs offered by the Rosenbach. And all of our winter programs are live now for members. If you're a member of the Rosenbach, you can register for some of these programs and courses, including a Dracula course that I will be teaching at the Rosenbach online. There are also a couple Robert Burns courses. There is a new Ulysses weekly course and a course on Virginia Woolf, which will be quite good. And you can find all that information at rosenbach.org. Our latest biblioventure, Sherlock Mondays, is also running weekly now. If you want to have some fun in between your Pickwick episodes, you can tune in live on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, or watch the replays on YouTube. Kevin, I know you have been following along Sherlock as well.
Looking forward to the Christmas Story Without Any Slush, as one termed it, coming up Monday, the Blue Carbuncle.
That is the next episode of Sherlock Mondays, episode 14. Will be live on Monday, December 18th, and it will be the Christmas episode of Sherlock Holmes, because the story, The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, which was published in January of 1892, takes place on the second day after Christmas, when Watson stops by Baker Street to wish Sherlock compliments of the season, and then they solve a mystery.
And it features Goose, too,
yes.
So we're back to that.
So you're welcome to join us for A Christmas Story Without Slush, as the great Sherlockian Christopher Morley called The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle. And you can find out information on that at our website. If you register for Sherlock Mondays, I will also send you weekly emails with links and actually cocktail recipes, because I have a cocktail on that show every week. Remember, you can write to me at epettit@rosenbach.org, and I may share your questions and comments on this segment called The Corresponding Members of Pickwick Monthly. And after talking about the George and Vulture last month with Kevin, right? We had Mary Jane of the Friends of Dickens in New York and the Dickens Fellowship of Philadelphia wrote to tell us about having lunch at the George and Vulture with Cedric Dickens, the great grandson of Charles Dickens. Thanks for writing about that. Mary Jane Henrietta J has sent me lots more videos on Dickensian subjects she finds on YouTube, and I still have lots of them to look at and catch up with. And Max M wrote that his wife, he said, my wife is very much getting into Regency clothing and is working on a corset and dress for herself. She asked if she could sew me something to go along with it as an accessory before the fact, Max wrote. And I said, sure. I told her I'd like a peculiar green coat like Mr. Tupman. And I'll work on figuring out how to make a Pickwick Club button. So a little reminder, too, that even though I constantly use the word Victorian, Pickwick Papers itself is not only not Victorian, because she's not even on the throne yet when it was published, but it's also kind of, but it's not also Regency, but it is connected to an earlier time, like just after. It's like in this weird, does anybody know, is there a name for this period in between the Regency and Victoria where we have a couple monarchs, but it's not quite either? And anyway, but that's at least the fashion that these.
Would it be Georgian or?
You can call it late Georgian.
Yeah, you can call it late Georgian then instead of, because Regency is technically still Georgian in a sense, but it's.
Didn't they say don't sometimes call it the Hanoverian? Because it's not. I mean, it's only William is on the throne, so it's only Georgian in the big picture kind of sense.
Yeah, I don't know, but culturally, it is also an in-between period. But in this novel, you can wear clothes that are more like Regency. Well, at least the older guys in this novel, Pickwick and the Pickwickians. So Max is having that made. He's also figuring out how to make a Pickwick Club button, and he's found a couple online that people have done. But I wanted to throw that out there. If anyone watching has any ideas about a Pickwick Club button, which they all in the group wear, of course, with a PC on it, and send them to me if you find any interesting ones, and I'll pass them along to Max. And I have one more note that I got this recently. It was Karen Kay, and she wrote a very lovely note and also sent a very generous donation to the Rosenbach that really touched me. She wrote, I just wanted to personally thank you for your wonderful sessions, both on Pickwick and Sherlock. I am in both, and I love them. Moments of joy in this excruciatingly painful world at the moment. So needed, so nourishing, and you are irreplaceable to both. I usually have to do the podcast replays due to conflicts, but could finally do both live this month. Seems more fun that way, especially for the Christmas-related themes coming up in both. And thank you so much, Karen. I hope you're watching live right now. That really means a lot to me that not only this note and that also the donation, it's very much appreciated. And thank you. I love to hear from all of you. So if anyone has a question or a comment about the serial part for the month or just Dickens in general, don't hesitate to drop me a note at epettit@rosenbach.org. All righty.
What a lovely note to get, Ed.
Yeah, that was a good one.
They love you out there in the Dickens universe.
That's, it's you guys too. That's one of the reasons I wanted to read that note. I'm so happy I have all you on here too to read that note, because, it's nice to know that's how people see this show and we're providing them something. We're not saving lives, but we're making some lives better. And I like that. So, all right, guys. Off to Dingley Dell. With everything crammed into the coach, including barrels of oysters and a giant codfish. I love this about Mr. Pickwick here. He when they're trying to cram everything in, he gets knocked into the boot himself, that gets the codfish that plows right into him, and he gets knocked in this comic moment. And his reaction, of course, is to smile and tip the guard and say, let's go get a drink for knocking me into the boot of the thing. And that's what he does. And then we're off on another coaching ride because Dickens loves coaching, doesn't he? Rattling, and all the words are there. Like, I'm not going to read this paragraph, but it's all there. The rattling of the coach, the crack of the whips, any little thing that a coach driver does, like adjustment he makes, Dickens likes to write about. The bugle traveling on top. It says dashing along the open road with the fresh, clear air blowing in their faces and gladdening their very hearts within them. They're on the Muggleton Telegraph. Many of these coaches had names to them. And so we get a big coaching ride for several paragraphs. They pass by people and see them in their houses next to their bright fires in the inns. And whenever
don't forget the ale and the brandy to speed you on your way.
When they stop to rest the horses or change the horses, they have a little ale and brandy and have to run, or a glass of ale and have to run to catch the coach again before it leaves. And they finally get to Muggleton, right? It's Muggleton, right? Yeah. And the Blue Lion, where they meet the fat boy who is going to Sam meets the fat boy for the first time. The fat boy, of course, glanced from the codfish to the oyster barrels and chuckled joyously. He was fatter than ever. This is like this is the greatest holiday in the world for the fat boy. He gets to eat and sleep. That's what we do at Christmas. Some of us get to do on Christmas, which is nice. Eat and sleep. But then they're off. We're just going to get right to Dingley Dell, as Sam and the fat boy and Sam ride there. And then in the carriage to bring all the luggage, but the Pickwick and his friends walk, because actually there's a line here and I don't know where it is, but they remembered the last time they went to Dingley Dell, and that's when the carriage overturned and the horse ran away, right? This is when Winkle couldn't ride a horse. And so they're like, we're just going to walk. Thank you. Mr. Wardle said, I think you guys will want to walk. And they do. So they walk to Dingley Dell, and don't play leapfrog in the field, even though they want to. And they arrive at Dingley Dell. They're greeted by the Wardles, the whole family. They're there for the wedding of, is it Bella, right? Bella and Trundle, right? Yes.
Isabella, I think.
Isabel, yes. And they call her Bella, not Arabella, who's
Winkle, who's the black-eyed girl with fur-lined boots who Winkle likes. Okay.
And they're pairing off already here. And like different Pickwickians, like they'll pair, like Tupman likes Emily Wardle, right?
No, Snodgrass is with Emily.
Is with Emily. And is it Tupman or Winkle with Arabella?
Winkle with Arabella.
I don't think we know her name at this point.
We don't.
It is mentioned. It's
mentioned later. Yeah.
Somewhere in the chapter it's mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't know that I didn't read ahead this time, and I don't think I would have, and I don't think I would have remembered her name from when I read this many years ago.
And one of the things that happens here, of course, is that Tupman, after the spinster aunt, episodes, he's supposed to be the lover, but now he's on the sidelines in the world of romance here.
And Pickwick remains this kind of character who's not of romantic. I mean, he pairs off with Wardle's mother in a sense, right? He like Sam does with his mother-in-law. Pickwick goes into a scene and finds the kind of oldest respectable woman and will kind of ingratiate himself with her. But it is he's talking to her, making sure she feels comfortable with everyone. Wants to, remind her that she's the kind of, presiding matron over everybody here. And but it also takes him out of play. It also reminds us that he's not of romantic interest in this novel, and which I guess is part of the irony, right? Because he's the one being taken to court over, a supposed romantic interest in Mrs. Bardell. Even Wardle's mother is even worn this beautiful dress, her lavender colored silk dress she has on, which I imagine is probably the best thing she owns. She can't hear unless she wants to hear. That still goes on in this. And Pickwick says that we'll show these boys and girls how to dance a minuet before they're 8 and 40 hours older. Well, they so he ingratiates himself to her. We're getting close to Christmas, everybody. Close to Christmas celebration. They have first they all party that night and play cards and have fun, and uproarious was the mirth of the table, and then they're drinking wine and they all go to bed. Then the next day it's all about the tumult of the wedding coming up. I wanted to mention this because this paragraph here, a wedding is a licensed subject to joke upon, but there really is no great joke in the matter after all. We speak merely of the ceremony and beg it to be distinctly understood that we indulge in no hidden sarcasm upon a married life. Dickens was just married this year. I love that line as almost like a kind of little joke to, to his wife, like not joking about getting married. Don't worry, hon. And mixed up with the pleasure and joy of the occasion are the many regrets at quitting home, the tears of parting between parent and child, the consciousness of leaving the dearest and kindest friends of the happiest portion of human life to encounter its cares and troubles with others still untried and little known. Natural feelings which we would not render this chapter mournful by describing, and which we should be still more unwilling to be supposed to ridicule. I'm struggling with, is there irony in this little passage here? Am I missing that? Or is he being very serious all of a sudden? Anybody?
I mean, look, my daughter lives up in Fishtown, Ed, as you know, with her boyfriend Tom, and they're talking about getting married and so on, but they're certainly not, untried or little known to each other living in that little place in Fishtown. I think it's hard to parse out how much irony is there and how much earnestness from a 21st century viewpoint, for me anyway, and looking at, what that meant in Victorian times, where, your daughter had lived home with you.
Yeah.
She probably had never left before, and it was, mixed up with the notions of the horrible child mortality at the times, and the risks that women took in just trying to have a child, right? I mean, what were the numbers on how many women were lost in childbirth? So, I think there was a lot of that in there that maybe for us emotionally, we don't have to deal with that.
And Dickens is going through all this. This is his life. This has been his life this year, is, starting a new life with a wife who is now about to have a child. And I think there's something, genuine in his, concern here in this little passage. Well, now we get, just very briefly, Sam and the fat boy here are together, but we get a Wellerism. I think. Is this where it is?
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
the one where now we look compact and comfortable, as the father said when he cut his little boy's head off to cure him of squinting.
It's a brutal, funny one, huh? As the father said when he cut his little boy's head off to cure him of squinting. So now he's all compact and comfortable. Yeah, I like it when the Wellerism goes dark. That seems to be the Wellerism that I like better. I like how Sam calls him he says, "Where does the mince pies go, young opium eater?" Because he's always,
You mentioned that recently, didn't you? The Confessions of an English Opium
Well, that was
Eater?
on Sherlock.
When was that published, Ed?
Opium Eater is before this, but shortly
The
before.
20s, maybe?
I think it's a little later. I think I don't know. Sometime around it's late 20s or
21.
early 30s. 21, that early? See, I didn't remember that. So there you go. That's the first edition is 21. And then he revises it later a couple times as it's published in more expanded, versions. That's Thomas de Quincey's Confessions of an English Opium Eater. I think we were talking in paragraphs or in parentheses there for a minute. For those who don't know it, but we talked about it on the Sherlock show because there's a story that deals with it. But here he's saying that to him because he's always falling asleep. So he's, this kid's, constantly getting knocked out. But his drug of choice is all this delicious food that they are bringing out here. Then they have the wedding breakfast. They get married. There's the wedding breakfast. Pickwick gives wine to everyone. Everyone makes toast. Everyone gets drunk because that's what you do at a wedding breakfast. You just eat a lot and then everyone gets drunk. And it's the toasting. I'm sorry, that's really what everyone does. Like toasts have to happen incessantly in the past. That's what people used to do. And everybody toasts everybody else. Even the poor relations at the bottom of the table get to toast people. Everyone toasts, and then Mr. Pickwick gives a little speech, and everybody loves him. And then they go out for a 25-mile walk. Is that when that happens?
Just about. First, the poor relations vanish under the table.
Yes.
Then they go for a walk.
A 25-mile walk. Let's do a little 25-mile walk before dinner. Really? Like I can imagine somebody proposing, hey, let's go for a 25-mile walk before we eat. What? So I'll ride in a car and you can walk. So Dickens was a great walker. Would walk 25, 30 miles, at any time. Walk for hours and hours and hours. I think it's just the energy,
Dickens, I can see it. Mr. Pickwick, I don't know.
Yeah, well, these guys always seem so fit. But
Yeah, I think that's the way they stay fit, even eating, things that aren't exactly healthy. I mean, they really do walk an extraordinarily well. Like my feet were so tired. I think I walked 7 miles when I was in New York last, and it was like I was hobbling by the time I got off the train, and I couldn't imagine. And I couldn't imagine doing quick 25-mile jaunt.
This is what Dickens did, though, all the time, was notorious for this and would wear his friends out doing it. Well, even his characters do it. And now we're going to get to Christmas, right? Well, Christmas celebrations. It's Christmas Eve and the wedding stuff is over now. And now it's the Christmas ball is basically what it is. And the best sitting room at the Manor Farm. It was a big room, and they've got holly and evergreen, the fiddlers and a harp, the carpets up, the candles, the fires blazing, and crackled on the hearth. And it says, if any of the old English yeomen had turned into fairies when they died, it was just the place in which they could have held their revels. And Pickwick is ready to dance. He's got his dancing, dancing tights on, his speckled silk stockings and smartly tied pumps. So he's right out of the I mean, that's a Regency dress right there, outfit there. That he's ready to dance. And they do. I'm going to get back to that old English yeoman line in a second, because first we'll just go through and they dance, and he does. Wardle questions him, and of course I'm going to dance. Of course I do. I'm going to dance, and Pickwick asserts himself, and they do. And away went Pickwick, hands across, down the middle to the very end of the room. I love it. This is almost like a jingle paragraph here, the way he would talk. Away went Mr. Pickwick, hands across, down the middle to the very end of the room, and halfway up to the chimney, back again to the door, who set everywhere, loud stamp on the ground, ready for the next couple, off again, all the figure over once more, another stamp to beat out the time, next couple, and the next again, never was such going.
It's jingle-like, but it's also, I don't think they would have had one at this kind of a dance, but it does have the cadence of a sort of a square dance caller, right? That's sort of a call the dance.
Well, that's a country dance. Country
Right.
dance is, so
Right.
that's what they're doing.
So we're getting a little bit of sort of almost free and direct discourse.
Yeah.
Of the scene there.
Of the rhythm of the narrator is following the kind of rhythm of the dance that's happening here.
Exactly.
They're likely doing the Sir Roger de Coverley at some point. I can't imagine they wouldn't be doing that. That was such a popular, dance song for everyone to do. And so they have the dance and then they all retire to Sam tells a story to the fat boy that I don't even understand. Does anybody understand this story? I don't know where I keep waiting for the punchline.
We have the illustration first, right?
Yes. Not yet. We're getting there because now they're going to do they do the dance and then they do the mistletoe. That comes up. That's in the kitchen.
I guess the moral of the story is if you're too fat, someone's going to steal your watch, I guess.
Well, at first they couldn't steal it because he's so fat. It was too tight. I wasn't quite sure the mechanics. It was obviously something they punched him in the gut and he doubled over. And I guess maybe that was able to free the watch enough.
And then he always suffered from, bad digestion because he got punched. And I'm lost on this one. James?
Well, technically, I believe he's head-butted, but yeah, it's such a long, digressive story.
Is it a Shaggy Dog story?
I think so. Because then the moral is then don't get fat, which is not really any moral that you could possibly have derived from this story that we've just heard. So yeah, I think it's sort of a Shaggy Dog story. We're gonna tell this long, involved story. And then give you a pat moral at the end that I think intentionally makes no sense.
Okay, I kept waiting for a punchline, like a Wellerism at the end, and I didn't get it, and I was shocked. But that makes more sense to me. Thank you. That it is a Shaggy Dog story. It's a dog story. It's just all about this long story, and then you don't get it at the end. So, all righty.
The fat boy.
Personal. Given the audience, it's not just a nonsensical conclusion, but a kind of a unhelpful piece of advice.
Well, I like that we are still in the time where, fat means content and happy. So that's what we're dealing with here. So there's nobody more content than the fat boy. Now we go to the kitchen, to repair to the large kitchen in which the family were by this time assembled according to annual custom on Christmas Eve, observed by old Wardle's forefathers from time immemorial. And there's a huge branch of mistletoe, and then they, do all this. And let's share the picture of this. The Fizz illustration. And here it is. Here they are with, I like all the meats and things hanging off the ceiling too. I like that. But there's the giant mistletoe hanging down here. And Pickwick is with, the Wardle's mother. And I don't know which is which here. Somebody help me. Who's on the right and who's on the left?
I think on the left is Winkle with
yes,
Arabella.
But she's not admitting yet that she likes him.
That looks like Tupman, but he's not really referenced much in this chapter.
Yeah. This must
It
be.
I
looks
thought,
a lot more like Tupman than Snodgrass. So
Oh, does it
yeah,
on the left?
me, I mean, I
I
feel like
assume that was Snodgrass.
isn't Snodgrass generally depicted as skinny? That looks like a slightly chubbier man, but could be wrong, or just could be the way.
Winkle's the one who's depicted as skinny.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the fat boys over here in the corner.
Yeah.
Everybody's
And-
pairing. There, well, and well, there are pairs around here. I'm assuming this is the bride back here, with Trundle maybe.
Bella with Trundle, and above the fat boy looks like Sam entertaining the housemaid.
Yes.
Into Sam's left, or as we see it to the right, is Wardle, I would say.
And here's Wardle,
Right
I
there.
imagine.
Yeah. So how far back did this mistletoe tradition go
That's
back?
pretty
Ed?
ancient. Yeah, that's a pretty ancient, pagan thing. That is, and part of this now we can really talk about this kind of Christmas stuff. I mean, and interrupt me with anything you have, but for centuries, religious festivals mark certain times of the year, but they're also always tied up into these folk festivals, which are not part of organized, religion. And this Christmas Yule season becomes, it's so tied. It becomes actually more about the folk celebrations, and there's very little religious celebration of Christmas going on for a while here. You get all it's the time of misrule, the mumming. Christmas gets banned in places, and especially America, Puritans hate it. And by the early 19th century, Christmas it's a minor religious holiday. But people are still doing these traditional celebrations for it. And but it's not like a unified celebration like it is today, where there's all these customs that people recognize right off the bat. It's still a very kind of localized celebrations go on. And I think partly because of the 19th century and the rise of literacy and print, and everybody's reading the same things about everybody, travel, and especially later in this century when the train comes in, and kind of people start to get out of their communities more than they were. That helps to kind of solidify what we'll all celebrate Christmas together. And of course, later the Christmas Carol plays an enormous role in that. But there's two books that very much influence the way Dickens sees Christmas and this kind of old English yeoman way of celebrating Christmas. And one of them is an American book, right? Washington Irving's The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, which, Dickens loved. And Irving describes the old squire and how he would celebrate and bring everyone into the big hall and have this big celebration, kind of what's going on here. But there was also a book published just the season before, the beginning of 1836, by Thomas Hervey, called The Book of Christmas. And it kind of goes through all the traditions of Christmas celebrations, and it did really well. And what's really interesting is Robert Seymour did the illustrations for the Book of Christmas. He was actually working on them he was finishing them up just as he was starting Pickwick, and then committed suicide. But I think he had finished his Book of Christmas illustrations. And let me share a couple of the images for that, which is the kind of which hint at the kind of ideas that Dickens really loved about Christmas. Here's one. He's got this frame around it of these kind of Gothic, arches, and which I think speak to very churchy, influence that's going on. Like, that's the time of the year. But here's, it says Christmas and his children. And so here's Father Christmas here, and they're all ready to party it up in the middle here. And if you notice, well, here's the guy with the bowl of wassail right here. And I can't tell if he's like a demon or a cat or what the heck he's supposed to be. But this guy has a sign and it says sirloin. So I think he's literally just meat. I think he's literally just a man made of meat. And this is a pudding right here. I'm pretty certain this guy's a pudding, and he's got a bottle
Oh.
and the the harp here playing the music. So it's about music and feasting and drinking. And there's a look, here's a turkey. People think turkey. I mean, turkeys were already a popular Christmas, meal. People were starting to enjoy that. I mean, Christmas, by the time Christmas Carol comes along 10 years later, that like solidifies it. Like then it becomes the bird, and the people like to do that because it's so popular, that book. But it had already started to become a popular bird to eat at this time of year. So there's this picture, and then there's another picture of Seymour's. Remember, this is before he illustrates Pickwick. Look at him. This is Enjoying Christmas, this is called.
Mhm.
And it's like his pre-Pickwick, because it's Robert Seymour that comes up with how Pickwick looks, what he looks like. And he was already drawing a character very much like that before, or he was just drawing the same character. Like in his head, I'm just drawing that guy that, or when he creates Pickwick, he's like, oh, I'm just going to use this guy, whatever it is.
And I think there are other ones in his hunting sketches in other places that have a similar round face and round glasses as well. So I think it's just kind of a stock image that repeats for him a lot.
The difference in this guy is he's clearly heavier than Pickwick, and Pickwick has thin legs, and this guy doesn't. This guy's big. But he's enjoying, and it's just called Enjoying Christmas. But he's just sitting here. He's got this steaming drink here, which is, I'm assuming, probably wassail, reading the Book of Christmas. And it's fire. This is, it's enjoying yourself. It's relaxing. He's not praying.
And it's almost midnight too. See what time it is?
Yeah. He's not doing anything religious. What he is doing is enjoying the season itself. And this is, one of the things that goes all through this, Book of Christmas that Hervey wrote, is about people, how they would have celebrations, and it's domestic, right? It's in a home. I mean, it might not have a family around him, but it is in a home, by his fireside.
A single cat owner.
Yes. We like that about him.
And we do think of it as a religious holiday, right? But there was a very much a civil side.
Yeah.
Because Christmas was one of the 4 English quarter days upon which rents were due, when servants were hired, and also for school terms, they began and ended on the quarter days, the 4 quarter days. So, and I'm not sure how far I think that goes way back, like, Shakespearean times, the notion of these quarter days.
Mm-hmm.
So like people were doing business on Christmas, like rents were getting paid. And
well, all the quarter days are technically religious, like Michaelmas is like St. Michael's feast. So they all start as kind of both religious holidays, which, contrary to what we would expect, is when you're doing these kind of business transactions.
Right. And March 25th is the Feast of the Annunciation, another one. Yeah. So absolutely, Courtney.
Well, Hervey's book of Christmas does kind of it's also a kind of a call for a Christmas revival of feasting and caroling, or that's what happens with it anyway. And there's some other publications that are doing the same thing. And this happens for a good decade up until, say, like Christmas Carol comes out. And but people are really wanting to. What's interesting is that in Hervey's Book of Christmas and in Washington Irving, it's all set on this kind of, Old English yeoman, squire, baron, baronial hall kind of celebration. And the biggest difference later that happens with Christmas Carol is Dickens then brings it into like the urban homes, and like, okay, so if that's the way they celebrate it, how do we compute that how did that translate into the way, a family, a middle-class family would celebrate? And one of the reasons why I think Christmas Carol became so popular at the time. But Dickens loves this, and so do I. I want to celebrate Christmas at Dingley Dell is where I want to celebrate Christmas. Mostly because I could smoke my pipe too, right? And where else am I going to go and smoke the pipe? Home, nowhere else. So Dingley Dell, I could. They how they celebrate is now, it's when they all tired of blind man's buff, there was a great game at Snapdragon, and when fingers enough were burned with that and all the raisins were gone, they sat down by the huge fire of blazing logs to a substantial supper and a mighty bowl of wassail, something smaller than an ordinary washhouse copper, in which the hot apples were hissing and bubbling with a rich look and a jolly sound that were perfectly irresistible.
Yes, I've oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've always wanted to try Snapdragon. For those who aren't familiar, but it sounds extraordinarily dangerous. I made a joke to Ed when we were at the Rosenbach's Christmas celebration. He said, absolutely no flame is allowed
Can't do it there.
in the rare book library. But basically you take a bowl and you put alcohol in it, and you put raisins at the bottom and you set it on fire. And the point is to stick your hand in it really quickly through the blue flames to acquire the raisins. And actually, when your hand comes out, you look, I don't know if this is Dickens' description or someone else, but it's fun because you turn off the lights and all of your friends look demonic because you stick your hand in, and when your hand comes up, the blue flames are still kind of on your fingers as you then put these hot raisins in your mouth.
Hours of hilarious fun for the kids. So, and the only reward is a raisin. Like, really? Like, that's what I just burned my hand for? A raisin? Land of plenty, I guess then it's like, that's such a treat to get the raisin. But I would feel really, ripped off.
Because I think the flame part of it is the fun part. I mean, there are lots of kids that are fascinated with fire and like to be naughty and have to be told not to. So
yep.
I think I can see the appeal of it.
Literally playing with fire. Literally playing with fire. So let's light some brandy, kids. I should try that too. Well, they're all grown up, so I can do that. It's all right. So.
Well, you lit that. That's how it came up, because you have to light that.
Light a bowl of brandy, throw some raisins in, go for it. I don't know. What do I throw? I'll throw in gold pieces or something, see if make it worth somebody's while to get their hand burned. So, all righty. Well, that's Snapdragon. They also play Blind Man's Buff, which is really described and playing here, and everybody's, you're blindfolded and you have to catch people. It always seems in Dickens' stories and his sketches and things like that, Blind Man's Buff is the way men get to touch women. That you get to go and touch somebody, and it's actually true. I think in real life too, these games were designed where, especially when you couldn't be physically affectionate with people or touch people, really, it was inappropriate. You could touch them in Blind Man.
And the same with the mistletoe. There's lots of non-consensual, kissing happening, occurring here. So
you hope it's more consensual because it's an opportunity for that. Like, oh, I can kiss somebody because normally you're not allowed to kiss anybody. And here you get to do that. So, well, it's Blind Man's Bluff, Snapdragon, and then and Wassail, and then Mr. Pickwick said Mr. Pickwick, looking round him, "This is indeed comfort." And then Wardle says, "Our invariable custom, everybody sits down with us on Christmas Eve, as you see them now. Everybody. This is like servants and all, right? Servants and all. And here we wait until the clock strikes 12 to usher Christmas in and beguile the time with forfeits and old stories. Trundle, my boy, rake up the fire." Forfeits, for people that might not know, is a game. Does anybody have an explanation for this? I have one, but it's a game. It's a bit like it might be. You might describe it like. Did you have one there, James?
Yeah, it's a guessing game.
Yeah, but you have to, if you answer you could also be asked to do something like, perform some little task, and if you don't do it right, you get a forfeit. Or if you don't answer a question, you get a forfeit, kind of, and for messing up, and then you might have to do something else. But very popular at the time, and but they also tell old stories. And this is that, and this is what will happen now. This is the kind of, ghost story tradition at Christmas time. Much more, prevalent in the UK and always had been than and I think in Europe too, where, at the darkest time of the year, people like to gather around and tell really scary stories to each other. I think it would probably still happen in America, except we have Halloween for that, and I think that's becoming the case other places too. Like Halloween's taking all that scary stuff to its own, and Santa became so massively popular, especially in the United States, that kind of, I mean, it's 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, not, a scary story on Christmas Eve that I always read to my kids because they refused me. They wouldn't let me read scary. They wouldn't let me read Christmas Carol because it has ghosts, and especially Marley when he comes in is really scary. My own children wouldn't let me read Christmas Carol. Now they do. They do. But the Christmas ghost tradition is really comes out of it, and that's part of this old English tradition that Dickens is hoping that will be revived and is playing a hand in as well. But first, Wardle says a song, a Christmas song, and he has this Christmas carol. I know there's music that exists to this, but people have put it to music, right? You're nodding there, James. Did people later put it to music, or did Dickens have a tune in mind?
I don't think that he had a tune in mind. I wrote a note of who did the Henry Russell did a famous piano setting of it. But when I listened to that recording, they had a completely different tune than the Russell one that I was familiar with. So I don't think that there's any one tune that's sort of the acceptable version.
Well, it's interesting. He just wrote the libretto for the Village Coquettes, and somebody else put it to music, which of the music was actually lost for that Village Coquettes. It had burned in a fire, and they actually lost the music for it. But Dickens is used to writing. He had just written a whole little operetta, and now he's writing this carol tune. We don't think of Dickens as musical, but he's clearly writing things for music to be put to music. And this Christmas carol, and which had it been like a popular, like had there been music associated originally, I wonder if this wouldn't have become a popular carol. It's a little hard to sing. It's very wordy. But it takes you through the seasons, right? Spring, summer, fall, and then it gets to, the winter time. Somebody want to read that? But My Song? James.
I got it. Go ahead,
you got
James.
it, Kev? No. All right, James, you do But My Song, and then Kevin, you do the last verse.
Why don't we all take are there 4 stanzas? Why don't we all take?
You want to do the whole thing? There's
I
My
thought we
Song
were doing.
is
Okay,
at
I
the
thought we were
end.
doing. Okay, I thought we were doing. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Okay, so you just want the end. Okay. So, but my song I troll out for Christmas stout, the hearty, the true, and the bold. A bumper I drain, and with might and main give 3 cheers for this Christmas old. We'll usher him in with a merry din that shall gladden his joyous heart, and will keep him up while there's bite or sup, and in fellowship good will part. In his honest pride, he scorns to hide one jot of his hard weather scars. There's no disgrace, for there's much the same trace on the cheek of our bravest tars. Then again I sing till the roof doth ring, and it echoes from wall to wall, to the stout old wight, fair welcome tonight, as the king of the seasons all.
That's what
Now
I
you
want
all
to
have
be.
to tumultuously applaud.
I want to be the stout old wight. All righty. Yeah, and that's, I mean, he, all through the stands even before it, this kind of that it's seasonal based, It's, it seems like it's very much part of this kind of folk tradition of celebrating the seasons and the time of year. And Christmas stout, that's what we want. They all applaud. It's wonderful. I have sung this when I do the Goblin, just all Sexton. Before I read it, I do a little bit of the and then I actually sing it, but I won't do that here. I won't record that. So, but I have sung it. So I just like the natural rhythm of it. So, but you have to come to my house to hear that. Well, they replenish the fire. The wassail goes around again. Of course it does. I just poured more for me. I'm definitely going to get through this bowl in no time. And it's snowing. And then the old lady, Mrs. Wardle, talks about, there was just such a wind and just such a fall of snow a good many years back. And it was Christmas Eve, and he told us a story about the goblins that carried away old Gabriel Grubb. And Pickwick is like, what? I have to hear this. So Wardle's like, that, don't worry about it. He's like, no, I want to hear this. So Wardle tells the story. And then this is where he ends the chapter with this, but bless our editorial heart. What a long chapter we have been betrayed into. We had quite forgotten all such petty restrictions as chapters, we solemnly declare. So here goes to give the Goblin a fair start in a new one, a clear stage and no favor for the Goblins. Ladies and gentlemen, if you please. And then we get chapter 28, the story of the Goblins who stole a Sexton. Now, I don't know if it's part of Dickens' joke that he continued the same chapter title or the same chapter number. Like, it's funny that I let this chapter go along, but this is still the same chapter, with a wink. Because when they do the, he has to, when they do the table of contents and it's like with an asterisk, it's people who are going to bind up the issues. So like it has to be the same. You can't change it then. Or is it a mistake? I don't know. It seems like almost like a wink that we're going to call it still chapter 28 after that little, section there where he says, I have to stop the chapter. Jake, did you have something?
This may be a good moment too to briefly note the author's note that's published with this number. Right, that announces that we're halfway through, and thanks for reading. And you might think I'm gonna triple the length, but I'm not.
That must be in a book edition that he published, because I was reading the serial version and it's not in the serial version.
It's not in the serial. It's not in the first edition of the serial. Is it an 11?
It's in the back of you have it in the back of your Penguin. But I don't see how it could be in a print edition, volume edition, because it talks about its own unfinishedness.
I did not come across it in my serial that I had.
Announcement at the conclusion of number 10. And I think the edition that I have didn't put it in there. The facsimile that I have of number 1 didn't include it.
Well, the scans that you posted from the University
don't
of
have
Victoria,
it because they're
later
later printings. But
was this possibly published elsewhere in like some sort of public announcement? I'm not sure.
No, I think it's an announcement at the conclusion of number 10. 10 months have now elapsed since the appearance of the first number of the Pickwick Papers, right? This is the one, right, Jake?
Exactly.
At the close of the year and the conclusion of half his task, their author may perhaps, without any unwarrantable intrusion on the notice of the public, venture to say a few words for himself. So, that's interesting, because I didn't have that in my first edition. And I think you are right that I think this is that Easton Press facsimile edition, who are like so, fastidious in making sure everything gets in there. I think this was missed.
Now, the University of Victoria scans that we've been using, that you've been posting, are
Yeah.
those, is that from the first printing or the second
No,
printing?
see, they're later printings, and
Okay.
they don't, and you'll notice too, because there's hardly any, the last few issues of that will have all the advertisements, but these issues that are posted now don't, and there were advertisements already in them. And what happened was when they went to reprint earlier serial parts, they weren't allowing the people that paid for their advertisements in the fund to go in the other one as well, so they were just taking them out and reprinting them, quickly. Yeah, but well, unfortunately we have to get to it at the end, Jake, because we still have this chapter to get. If that's where it was, we should get to it at the end.
Fair enough.
Because this
sort of this editorial heart joke might
Yeah.
be sort of it's an interesting context for the question of how intentional this is. That this is a moment where he's sort of talking in propria persona about where the number is.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to just go in detail through the story. What in a kind of, in a nutshell, it's Gabriel Grudge is, he's well, I mean, the best way to describe him is he's kind of like Scrooge without the money. He hates people who celebrate Christmas. He's an ill-conditioned, cross-grained, surly fellow, a morose and lonely man who consorted with nobody but himself and an old wicker bottle which fitted into his large, deep waistcoat pocket. He's kind of Scrooge, but instead of the money, he just likes to drink. And he's poor, and he digs graves as the sexton at a churchyard. He's like Scrooge too, in the sense that he likes to make jokes about the awful things that he does, like he or thinks when he hears the carolers. The children, when he hears the children running around and screaming and hollering and having a good time, he smiled grimly and clutched the handle of his spade with a firmer grasp as he thought of measles, scarlet fever, thrush, whooping cough, and a good many other sources of consolation besides. He hits the one kid on the head, right, who's singing a carol. And a young urchin roaring out some jolly song about a Merry Christmas. So he, rapped him over the head with his lantern 5 or 6 times just to teach him to modulate his voice. It's, he's horrible, but it's funny, and he's singing song, and he's even making a joke. He's singing as he's digging the grave, he says, "A coffin at Christmas, a Christmas box, ho ho ho." So, and the fact that he says ho 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 is, for us, it's a funnier because that's the Santa laugh. But as he's doing this, he's of course visited by the goblins. The first goblin appears sitting on the tombstone and accosts him. And this is where we have a great Fizz illustration. Is this it? Yeah. Right past this one. And here it is. Goblin leering at him. He's got his long tongue here. What's this hat called again? The
Sugarloaf.
Sugarloaf hat, yeah. The wide round brim. Gabriel Grubb is terrified. I like the kind of almost like ghost of the church in the background. That it's Fizz frequently does this as this kind of faded buildings in the background, but for this it looks ghostly because of the scene and the creepy tree here.
And the skull on the ground and the bone.
Yeah. Right here. Yeah. Bone and a skull. He's probably just dug that up. they were in the hole that he dug up because, they just keep filling up the holes. So there's only so many bodies you can fit in the churchyard, especially over hundreds of years. And, by this time, this is a big problem in the late 18th and early 19th century is all these churchyards were filled. So they were like just crunching stuff down to fit more bodies on top. So here's Gabriel Grubb. There's an interesting I found on, I'm trying to think of what collection it's in. And this is an earlier watercolor of that scene from Fizz in color, which I really like. So this is a study that he did before he came up with the final drawing. It's interesting the colors that he's chosen too. He's chosen to put red on them both, and even Grubb here. So which makes him seem more festive in a sense to us. But this is this is an early study from Fizz. And forgive me for not remembering the collection that it's in. It might be at the Charles Dickens Museum. Actually, now that I'm thinking of it, I think that's where it is. Well, the goblins visit him. They question, what are you doing at Christmas time? Digging a stone, digging a grave. That's not what you're supposed to be doing now. You're supposed to be out with everybody else, having parties and singing carols. And then all the goblins show up and they play leapfrog to musical accompaniment of the church organ, which I love. And then they pull him down into the earth, make him drink a fiery beverage, which is no fun. It's not wassail. It's hard. It's like drinking fire. It's like drinking Snapdragon. And then they show him scenes of a family through the years, happy in each other's company. And, even though they over the years, some of them die, they're all still kind of happy in each other's company. And they keep asking him what he learns, and he's like, that was nice. And then they kick him. They just, the head goblin kicks him, the king of the goblins, and then all the rest of the goblins kick him. And then he's shown, one beautiful scene after another. And finally, they I mean, the questions they ask him: who makes graves at a time when other men are merry and take pleasure in it? And they tell him, this is early on, they say, we know the man who struck the boy in the envious malice of his heart, because the boy could be merry and he could not. And then they show him all these scenes under the earth, and it's fun. And when you read it, I mean, when they're kicking him, and all the great lines that Dickens gives about this are really, it's supernatural, scary, but funny, much like, Christmas Carol in a sense. We'll do later. He finally starts to change. What he sees is, in these scenes of other people living their lives, he says they bore within their own bosoms the materials of happiness, contentment, and peace. Women are, of course, the tenderest and most fragile of all God's creatures. We have that, but they were often superior to the sorrow, adversity, and distress. Yeah, because they had to be, dude, because they were forced to be. Men like himself, Gabriel Grubb learns, who snarled at the mirth and cheerfulness of others, were the foulest weeds on the fair surface of the earth. Setting all the good of the world against the evil, he came to the conclusion that it was a very decent and respectable sort of world after all. And no sooner had he formed it than the cloud which had closed over the last picture seemed to settle on his senses and lull him to repose, and one by one the goblins faded from the sight, and as the last one disappeared, he sank to sleep. The kind of happiness despite the trials of the world is the lesson that he learns. It's a little cliched. It's like was anybody moved by the lesson that he learned? I think I like this story, and I'm not saying it's, I don't agree with it in a sense. I think this is a good thing for him to learn and to celebrate with Christmas, but it's not quite genius.
Well, I mean, I don't think it has the personal connection that the Scrooge, that is, I think, what makes the Scrooge narrative so individually moving. He's seeing scenes from his own life and of people he knows, right? In a way, when I was reading it, with all the little gremlins and the little goblins and they go underground, there's something actually more like demonic about it. It's almost like a hell type scene. Especially he's drinking the fiery water. They're kind of kicking him, physically abusing him. It's almost like a kind of I don't know, it's more of a more than an emotional transformation, more of kind of a transformation based on kind of fear and fear of vengeance, perhaps. And I think maybe that's why we're not kind of feeling the heartwarmingness as the Christmas Carol Scrooge story.
Well, and to that point, his reformed state, not to get ahead of ourselves, but not to rely too much on a comparison, but such a big deal is made of Scrooge's reformation, and he's so generous, and everybody loves him after all, and happily ever after, and Gabriel Grubb, it's more of he gets scared straight than he gets transformed, right? He's just kind of like, I'm not gonna make any more jokes about dead people on Christmas. Just leave me alone. Stop kicking me. Which maybe works as the kind of spooky story, or the kind of that side of things, but doesn't quite have that sort of. I mean, the story isn't one that ends with a sense of cheer. The cheer happens in the previous chapter.
Well, there is the moment where the young child dies, and Gabriel Grubb looks on with an interest he never felt before. So, to me, that was always the moment in this story that had the purest strain of pathos, if you would, But as a story, I mean, now this is the 7th of the 9 stories that Dickens inserts, and I think it works for what it is. I think it works great. We have 2 more to come in the next 10 parts, so it's sort of the proportion gets dialed back of these stories, and the ones that came before were really gruesome, right? There was some really dark stuff. I have a lot of great memories, James, of reading this with you, and in the bicentennial year 2012. Ed, you mentioned reading it aloud. I mean, it works really well. It's really tight. It's concise. James, I think it was your adaptation. You did it for 4 readers, and it was just a pleasure to perform. There's a lot of sort of comic slapstick to it, and I think for what it is, it works really well. But yes, I do agree. It doesn't pack nearly the emotional impact of what's to come.
And it might the first time you encounter it, and it might actually when you're listening to a performance of it too. So because you're right, it's a great out loud story. It's my favorite of all the interpolated tales. I think it works so much better. It's a very complete story, and I think Dickens really wants to create a kind of a Christmas ghost story, a story that could be used at this time, and is really trying hard to make that work, and he does. It does. It's that it's basically what he says is, the world's not so bad, and it's probably because we're used to the massive transformation of Scrooge and everything that he's put into that story of Christmas Carol, and it's about eradicating ignorance and want, and all the personal stories with Scrooge's own family, and then with the Cratchits that kind of give that such resonance. We don't get that here. This is far more bare bones. But it completely works, and as a story, especially as a tale told. And he wakes up an altered man. So, but he was an altered man, and he could not bear the thought of returning to a place where his repentance would be scoffed at and his reformation disbelieved. So he actually leaves the town. He doesn't go among the people that he knows to make up for it. He realizes that he needs to go somewhere else, and he does. And then the legends grow up about him. He's taken away by goblins, and and there was a taken through the air on a chestnut horse, blind of one eye, with the hindquarters of a lion and the tail of a bear, that knocked off a piece of the church weathercock, and then comes back 10 years later. And then they have to be like, oh, I guess you weren't taken away by goblins. But, he still has the story that they tell about. And I love this. And well, even also at the end of the story, when he wakes up and he's like, it really happened because my shoulders hurt. But of course, you slept on the ground all night, maybe, could be. And I like that part of it too. Like in A Christmas Carol, there's no doubt in the world that he is visited by ghosts. But this is one of those stories that's like, maybe it was a dream. And that questioning, I think, is good for tales, especially short tales, that what's actually going on here at the end.
And drinking straight gin out of a bottle probably had nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with it. Wouldn't have bothered me at all. But Bose gives us a little lesson. If a man turns sulky and drink by himself at Christmas time, he may make up his mind to be not a bit the better for it. Let the spirits be never so good, or let them be even as many degrees beyond proof as those which Gabriel Grubb saw in the Goblins' cavern. So a little, anybody can reform, anybody can wind up being an altered man. And what is he saying at the end of this? Let the spirits be never so good, or let them be even as many degrees beyond proof as those which Gabriel Grubb saw. It doesn't matter how many spirits happen, you can still become an altered man, right?
I really love the sort of, they believe the ghost story, but then when he arrives and tells them that it's true, it becomes harder to believe because they already had believed another thing and they don't want to get fooled again. That sort of it's an interesting twist on the uncertainty that Ed, you were mentioning here, where we the readers really know, or something close to really know, but as a sort of story in the story world, and of course that's what we're getting Dingley Dell out of it too, right? It's this kind of retold story. I just think it's very funny, the idea that they did believe it, and then they stopped, and they weren't so sure, and they figured it out eventually.
Well, there we have it. Christmas, Dingley Dell, ghost story for Christmas, the Goblins. I hope it becomes part of especially if for those who are watching or reading Pickwick Papers for the first time, I hope that this becomes part of your Christmas going forward. But Dickens does have this address at the end here that Jake pointed out, that and that he's going to keep it in 20 numbers. I feel like, I don't know, is this too long to read? No, let's just read it. He has been long desirous to embrace the first opportunity of announcing that it is his intention to adhere to his original pledge of confining this work to 20 numbers. He has every temptation to exceed the limits he first assigned to himself, that brilliant success, an enormous increasing sale, the kindest notice, and the most extensive popularity can hold out. There are, one and all, sad temptations to an author, but he has determined to resist them. Firstly, because he wishes to keep the strictest faith with his readers, and secondly, because he is most anxious that when the posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club form a complete work, the book may not have to contend against the heavy disadvantage of being prolonged beyond his original plan. And then he says he's just going to keep doing this, and you can buy it everywhere. And it ends as a kind of advertisement. That you can, that we shall keep perpetually going on, beginning again regularly until the end of the fair. I'm not quite sure what he was. I guess he just wanted to have a word with people, because this is the only serial that happens, where he's had several instances of announcing things, and there will be announcement come spring, when they're interrupted for a month, which we're going to meet anyway and talk about the reason they're interrupted. But he feels Dickens is he's the showman here. He's the guy that comes out on stage when the crowd comes out, and he has to say a couple words about the show that I've just put on here, that I've just written, that you all love so much. He's still just Bose. This isn't, Charles Dickens, writing a novel. This is Bose the showman entertaining you once a month, which is what I'm, getting from this. And it's one of the reasons that makes this so much fun. And especially in this one, where he's tied it to the times of the year, where the Pickwickians are going through the same, movement of the seasons as the readers are. All right. Are we all ready? We okay now? We can all celebrate our Christmas and more joyfully now for having celebrated Pickwick Papers. Courtney, James, Kevin, Jake, thank you for all coming on the number 10 of Pickwick Monthly. Pickwickians watching, thank you for joining us. Coming up next month, James will be on with me to discuss number 11, I think. Right, James? He's looking surprised, like maybe he didn't realize that.
I guess so.
Do you follow Courtney? Is this our cycle? So maybe James will be on, maybe someone else. We will find out who is going to do number 11 with me, and which we will get one more day of Christmas. It's actually Christmas Day is number 11. That's chapter 30. And they go ice skating. So it's Pickwick on Ice is what we're going to call that episode. And we also meet Bob Sawyer and his bachelor friends, who do nothing but, hang around and drink and smoke. I have no idea why these people like that. Again, let me remind everyone to subscribe to our channel, to like these videos. You can support the Rosenbach through donation. Your support helps us create more programs like this and also care for our collections. You could also become a member. Membership gives you early access and discounts to programs and courses. You can find out more at our website. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library. I will see you all next month for number 11 of the Pickwick Papers. Merry Dickens, everyone.
Merry Dickens.